Everyone's heard the phrase mindset shift. It's everywhere. Podcasts, books, social media, quotes on walls. But here's the wild part. Most people have no idea what it actually is, or how to recognize it when it's happening, or how powerful it really can be. And yet, you've already done it. You've shifted your mindset before, after a breakup, after a failure, after hitting a wall so hard you realized, I can't keep thinking like this. That was a mindset shift. The problem is, most of us only shift when life forces us to, when pain shows up, when survival kicks in, when you're backed into a corner. So the shift happens, but it's reactive, it's emotional, and it's temporary. And nobody ever tells us, hey, what you just did right there? That's skill. That's leverage. That's a superpower. A mindset shift isn't about being positive. It's not about motivation. And it's definitely not about pretending things are fine when they're not. A real mindset shift is about changing where you're thinking from. Because when you don't change that, you can work harder, hustle more, and stay just as stuck. But when you learn how to shift on purpose, that's when effort turns into results. That's when clarity replaces chaos. That's when growth stops feeling like force and starts feeling like alignment. So in this episode, we're going to break this down. What a mindset shift actually is, how to know when it's time for one, and how mastering this may be one of the greatest hidden superpowers you already have. Are you ready? I am. I'm Jonah. I'm your person. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the show. We're going to be talking about thinking differently or staying stuck here in part one. But before we go any further, let's get more clear on what a mindset shift actually is. Because once you recognize it, you can use it. A mindset shift is the moment you realize that the way you've been thinking, the questions you've been asking, the assumptions you've been making, the lens you've been looking through, is no longer getting you where you want to go. It's not a breakdown, and it's not a failure. It's an internal adjustment. Sometimes it happens after something painful, when life forces you to see differently. Other times it happens before, when you pause, zoom out, and decide, I'm not going to approach this the same way I always have. That's the difference between reacting to life and designing how you move through it. A mindset shift simply is changing where you're thinking from before you change what you do. Here's the truth. Feeling stuck isn't a character flaw. It's not about laziness, intelligence, or even opportunity. Most of the time, it simply means you're thinking from a place that once kept you safe, but no longer helps you move forward. So many of us assume that the next step is about doing more, or finding the right tool, the right timing, the right strategy, the right push. And sometimes those things do matter. But underneath it all, that is just something quieter and more influential. The perspective we're using to make decisions. A lot of us are still thinking from old rules we picked up early, rules that worked in one season of life, but don't quite fit anymore. Not because we're wrong, but because we've grown. That's usually where the first real mindset shift begins. It's the moment you realize the game didn't change overnight. You did. And when that happens, it's not about blaming yourself for past results. It's about recognizing that new levels often ask for new ways of seeing. Not more pressure, not more force, just a different lens. Here's an example. Steve Jobs. When he came back to Apple in the late 1990s, he didn't just focus on selling computers better. He looked at the world differently. He shifted his thinking. What if people don't know what they want yet, but I can show it to them? That shift didn't come from trying harder. It came from seeing things differently. This is the door that most people never open. Thinking differently isn't about working harder or longer hours or forcing effort. It's about seeing the patterns no one else sees or making new connections and then creating leverage from where you already are. And here's the kicker. This is a skill you already have. You've done it before, probably under survival mode, but without even knowing it. Now the question is, can you do it on purpose? Because thinking differently in this line, between spinning your wheels and actually moving forward, it's the difference between staying stuck or starting to climb. One mindset shift, different life. There's a moment that happens before real change begins. It's quiet. It doesn't look dramatic, and most people miss it. It's the moment you realize the way I've been approaching this isn't wrong, but it isn't working anymore. This is the mindset shift before the mindset shift. It's not action yet. It's awareness. This is where someone stops saying, I just need to push harder, and starts asking, what if the problem isn't effort, but perspective? And for a lot of people, this moment shows up as discomfort or restlessness or a low-level frustration they can't name. Life isn't falling apart, but it doesn't feel aligned either. That's not a crisis. That's information. It's your internal system letting you know that the thinking that got you here may not be what gets you to where you need to go next. Oprah has talked openly about this moment in her own life, the shift from seeing herself as someone shaped by circumstance to someone capable of shaping her future. Nothing externally changed overnight. What changed was the question she was asking. Instead of, why did this happen to me? It became, what am I meant to do with what I've been given? One mindset shift, different life. This is where people either lean in or back away, because awareness creates responsibility. Once you see that a different way of thinking is possible, you can't unsee it. And this is also where many people stall, not because they're incapable, but because shifting your mindset means letting go of a familiar identity, even if that identity no longer fits. But here's the upside. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to begin. You just need to recognize the moment when a shift is being asked for. That recognition alone changes how you move, how you choose, and how you respond. And over time, those small internal shifts compound into visible external change. And here's your first challenge. Before the next decision you're facing, big or small, pause and ask yourself, am I trying to solve this from the same place I always have? And if the answer is yes, don't judge it, just notice it. Because awareness is where every real mindset shift begins. Before we move into part 3, I want to offer you a bridge from the unknown to the known. What you're really developing here is awareness. And awareness isn't a mindset thing. It's the foundation of emotional intelligence. Not the buzzword version, the real one. Emotional intelligence starts with noticing what's happening inside you before it turns into a reaction, a decision, or a pattern you repeat. And most people aren't lacking discipline or motivation. They're lacking awareness in that moment it actually matters. A mindset shift can't happen without it, because you can't change what you don't notice. And once awareness kicks in, everything else becomes possible. Choice, restraint, clarity, strategy. And that's why this matters. Because awareness is what turns unconscious survival into conscious growth. You're already doing it, just not on purpose. Here's the part most people don't realize. And honestly, it's the most empowering part of this entire conversation. You already know how to shift your mindset. You just haven't been doing it intentionally. Think about it. At some point in your life, something happened that forced you to see differently. A breakup that changed your standards. A failure that made you reassess how you approach things. A moment where continuing the same way simply wasn't an option anymore. That was a mindset shift. You didn't read a book. You didn't attend a seminar. And you didn't map it out on a whiteboard. You adapted. That's awareness turning into action without you even naming it. For most of us, this is how mindset shifts first show up, not as a strategy, but as survival. Pain, pressure, or a consequence push us to say, I can't keep thinking like this. And whilst those shifts can be powerful, they're also reactive. They happen after the damage is done, after the lesson is forced. But here's the key difference, and this is where growth accelerates. When you shift your mindset on purpose, you don't wait for life to corner you. You notice patterns earlier. You interrupt reactions sooner. You choose differently before the fallout. This is where awareness becomes leverage. It's also why so many people underestimate themselves. They think mindset work is something they have to learn from scratch. It's not. It's something you refine. The skill isn't creating awareness. It's recognizing it in real time, catching yourself mid-thought, mid-reaction, mid-pattern, and choosing again or differently. This is what separates repeating the same cycles from slowly, intentionally breaking them. You don't need a personality overhaul. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to bring intention to something you are already doing naturally. Because once you realize that mindset shifting is already part of who you are, mastery stops feeling overwhelming and starts feeling possible. Let's now talk about survival shifts versus strategic shifts here in part 4. Not all mindset shifts are created equal. Some are born out of pressure. Others are chosen with intention. A survival shift happens when life backs you into a corner, when pain gets loud, when fear takes the wheel. You don't change because you want to. You change because you have to. And to be clear, survival shifts aren't bad. They keep us moving. They protect us. They help us get through hard seasons. But survival shifts are reactive. They're driven by emotion, and they're focused on immediate relief, not long-term direction. A strategic shift, on the other hand, happens before the breakdown or before the burnout, and before the pattern repeats itself again. It's when you pause and say, if I keep thinking like this, I already know where it leads. Strategic shifts are quieter. They don't announce themselves, and they often look boring from the outside. But internally, they're powerful. Michael Jordan talked about this later in his career, and how the game slowed down. Same opponents, same pressure, different awareness. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was anticipating. And that's the difference. Survival asks, how do I get through this? Strategy asks, who do I need to become so this doesn't keep happening? One is about escape, and the other is about evolution. Here's where a lot of people get stuck, and they keep waiting for pain to give them permission to change. But pain is a loud teacher, and an expensive one. Strategic thinkers don't wait for crisis. They learn from patterns. They notice trends in their own behavior, and they make adjustments whilst things are still relatively calm. That's emotional intelligence in action. Not suppressing emotion, but not letting it drive the car either. And this is where real freedom starts to show up. Because when you can shift strategically, you stop living in reaction mode. You start creating momentum instead of recovering from mistakes. And here's your second challenge. Think about one situation in your life where you usually wait until things get uncomfortable before changing. Ask yourself, what would it look like to make a strategic shift here before I'm forced to? You don't need the perfect answer, just the honest one. At some point, effort stops being the problem. Most people who are stuck aren't lazy. They're trying, constantly. They're showing up, pushing, grinding, and doing their best. But trying and winning are not the same thing. Trying is about output. Winning is about alignment. Trying says, if I do just one more, something has to change. Winning asks, is what I'm doing actually moving the needle? This is one of the most important mindset shifts a person can make, because effort without direction leads to exhaustion, not results. Kobe Bryant understood this deeply. Early in his career, Kobe was known for outworking everyone. First in, last out, relentlessly. But what separated him later wasn't just his work ethic, it was precision. He studied opponents. He studied tendencies. And he studied timing and psychology. He wasn't just trying to score more points. He was trying to control the game. That's the shift. Winning isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things on purpose. This applies far beyond sports. In life, trying often looks like saying yes to everything. Winning looks like choosing intentionally. Trying reacts to every opportunity. Winning filters them. Trying is busy. Winning is focused. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes trying harder is just a way to avoid thinking differently. Because thinking differently requires you to slow down, to question assumptions, to let go of familiar patterns, even productive-looking ones. But once this shift happens, everything changes. Effort becomes efficient. Energy gets protected. Results compound. You stop measuring success by how tired you are and start measuring it by how effective you've become. All right, let's talk about how to begin shifting on purpose here in part 6. Up until now, we've talked about mindset shifts as something that happens naturally. Sometimes after survival moments, sometimes almost unconsciously. Here's the next step. Doing it on purpose. Because awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing you can shift doesn't automatically make it happen. You have to decide to shift and then start practicing it intentionally. So how do you begin? Step 1. Notice where you're thinking from. Before any action, pause. Ask yourself, am I reacting from habit, fear, or comfort? Or am I choosing this path consciously? Step 2. Name the pattern. When you can put words to it, like, I'm overworking instead of strategizing, or I'm avoiding conflict instead of leaning in, you take away its unconscious power. Step 3. Experiment with small shifts. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. Pick one situation today where you usually react instinctively. Pause, breathe, then try a new approach. Step 4. Reflect and adjust. After you try it, notice what changed. Did you feel different? Did your results change, even slightly? Refine your approach, then keep going. Here's the thing. This is exactly what people like Serena Williams do. They aren't naturally perfect. They practice awareness and intentionally put it into power and into play relentlessly. Every decision is a chance to shift slightly, learn, and improve. And here's your reminder. You are already capable of doing this. You've done it before, probably when life forced your hand. And now, it's just about making it deliberate. And here's your third challenge. Pick one area of your life, work, relationships, health, mindset, where you usually just react. This week, consciously pause and apply a small mindset shift in that area. Notice what changes. And if you have to in your pause, take a deep breath. Even tiny shifts compound over time. And before you know it, you're thinking and living at a higher level. Here in part 7, we're going to talk about the shift that changes everything. So let's zoom out for a moment. This entire episode hasn't been about motivation. It hasn't been about grinding harder, fixing yourself, or becoming someone you're not. It's about remembering. Remembering that the way you think isn't fixed, that the lens you've been using to see your life isn't the only one available, and that the version of you who feels stuck isn't broken. They're just operating from an old level of awareness. Every part of this journey pointed to the same truth. Your life doesn't change first. Your thinking does. When your thinking shifts, your awareness expands. And when your awareness expands, your choice appears. And when choice appears, You stop living on autopilot and start living intentionally. That's the real shift. Not from failure to success, not from fear to confidence, but from unconscious survival to conscious creation. And here's the part I really want you to hear. You don't need permission to access this. You don't need to earn it. And you don't need to wait until you're ready. You already have the ability to notice, to pause, to choose, to respond instead of react. That's your superpower, my friends. The people you admire the most didn't unlock something mystical. They simply learned how to operate from a higher level of awareness over and over again until it became who they are. And now you know the path. So as you leave this episode, don't rush to change everything. Just notice one moment, one reaction, one decision where you choose awareness instead of autopilot. That's how it begins. That's how it compounds. That's how lives quietly and then dramatically change. Before we close, I want you to pause for a moment. Not to do anything, not to fix anything, but just to notice where you are right now. Because everything we just explored in this episode comes down to one simple truth. Change doesn't begin with effort. It begins with awareness. When you start noticing how you think, what you assume, what you react to automatically, you step out of survival mode and into something far more powerful. Choice. That's where real growth lives. Not in forcing yourself to become better, not in chasing motivation, but in seeing clearly enough to choose differently when it matters. You don't have to overhaul your life after this episode. You don't need a grand plan. You just need one moment of awareness, one pause, one breath, one decision made from clarity instead of habit. That's how momentum starts. Quietly, intentionally, and then all at once. And if you ever find yourself slipping back into old patterns, that doesn't mean you failed. It means you noticed. And noticing is the work. So carry this with you. Awareness creates space. Space creates choice. And choice is where your power lives. Now, take this with you as you move forward. If you enjoyed this episode and it resonated with you, do me a favor. Subscribe. It's free. Leave a review. Drop a comment or share it with someone who feels stuck but doesn't know why. Because this message reaches people when they're ready to hear it. And you might be the bridge. Thanks for continuing to go on this journey with me. Join me next week when episode 50, Messages from the Universe, Volume 6, drops. Have a great week.